interacting with the wilderness during a season of being a park ranger in a place that has no visitors. He writes like 20 pages about a conversation he had with a mouse. There's like a whole chapter on the smells of different woods that he uses for his campfire. It's a really stark book. Like a man describing his solitary year in the desert should be. And if you're in the right frame of mind, like you're stuck in a cabin for 2 weeks in Mammoth, or like you're just chilling on the beach for 2 weeks and nothing happens and no one's talking to you and you're not watching TV, it's perfect. But there's none of like the high pizzazz, like video games and dynamite and boobies kind of stuff. So it doesn't have like the high flying excitement. It's just like a really sparse, cerebral, like space book. His other book, Monkey Wrench Gang, is a quote-unquote wink-wink fiction book, which most people believe is actually about the man's real life. As an environmental terrorist, a radical environmentalist, him and his homies used to like blow up bridges and cut down billboards to like not develop the American West. It's called monkey wrenching when you sabotage development. Don't yell at Kyler all the way from the back corner. Your whisper stage might be disrupting to somebody who's trying to work.
My dad did that.
Tight. This was a thing, like back in the 60s and the 70s, and Homeboy wrote a book about it, and he couldn't say it's him, because obviously he'd be admitting to a bunch of felonies, but it's probably about him. That book does have explosions and drunk driving and car chases and sex, so high school kids tend to think that's a pretty fun read. It's a lot of pages, but kids seem to go right through it. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring is totally canonic to environmental science. She's the lady that wrote the thing about DDT and the pelicans and the eagles. And back when this book came out, the entire American public was like, what? Like humans have relationships to the environment? And like now I get to teach a whole class about that, but when she wrote the book, that was like the first public awareness of these complicated systems that connect you to the rest of the world. I actually think it was a fascinating moment in cultural history. As a book, it's kind of science dorky and kind of hard to read sometimes. So The Earth First Reader is about radical environmentalism. I have to warn you that Earth First is classified by the US government as a domestic terrorist organization. Because they killed people, and that's not funny. They wanted to protest climate change and fossil fuels, so they lit a car dealership on fire, and the parents couldn't save their child from a neighboring house that was burning, and they literally killed a baby in his crib. And like, that all of a sudden stops being a joke, right? Like, I cannot support terrorism. The planet needs more love. We are all God's children. So I don't know, I don't like, I'm not like a fan of Earth First. I'm not about that. However, members of Earth First have written some like really thoughtful, poetic, philosophical essays about the environment. And so this is like a collection of their essays, and it's kind of a fascinating read. Terrorism isn't cool, but some of the authors said some amazing stuff. How many of you have read Guns, Germs, and Steel? They used to make you read it and then they stopped. High school kids kind of hate it. It's like a lot of pages. But Jared Diamond is this really amazing thinker who connects like global trends and archaeology and anthropology and economics and biology and evolution. And he just puts together these like really thoughtful analyses of humans. He's like a really intelligent biologist, and he's like a real deal scientist. He's a really well-respected professor at UCLA. And he just has these like amazing connections. So Guns, Germs, and Steel is how about European culture has kind of taken over the world through the use of militarism, disease, and metallurgy. And Collapse is about how societies respond to changing environments and how that means that societies either last through changes or they collapse. Like that lecture I gave you at the beginning of the year. Okay. The John DeGraff book, Affluenza, I can't recommend this book enough. Look at the title. Affluenza, like affluence and influenza, like the disease of consumerism. And it's like I should probably warn you, this is kind of like a liberal point of view. This is not like the free market is rad. It's like the free market is ruining our world. So it does have a political bias, but just saying, it is like really easy to read, really interesting, really compelling, and it totally rocked my world. It has like a bunch of like fascinating data about how our society is changing and how we as consumers are like less well off and causing more harm. I'll give that to Abby, put your name on both papers. I really like Affluenza. It's very readable. The Last American Man is probably the shortest book. If you can't get over the page count, I think that's the shortest. And it's also a pretty interesting, pretty easy to read book. It's about this guy named Eustace Conway. Anybody heard of this guy? When he was your age, he like burned his wallet and grabbed a big hunting knife and walked into the forest and like ghosted into the wild. And like ate roadkill and like hunted by hand and like got really skinny and pulled his own teeth and like made shelters out of fallen trees and shivered a lot. And he became like bitter and antisocial and kind of misogynistic and violent. And was just kind of an amazing, he still is, he's still alive, kind of an amazing man for how extreme he is about not liking modern society. You know, a lot of us don't like our society. I'll bet a lot of you don't. And so he said, "Buck it, I'm over it," and just did something about it and bailed into the trees. And I don't know, man, people that have met him, like my homie Justin knows him, he does not sound like a very easy guy to work with, like kind of an a-hole, apparently. But it's a fascinating story about a fascinating character, and the woman is like a really lightweight writer, like she's really easy to read. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love after this, which is a totally different book. Paul Hawkins' Blessed Unrest is nonfiction about our economy and winners and losers, how the world's poor are affected by the leading nations. And he's a really strange type of economist. He's like a very alternative economist. He looks at stuff that other economists tend to not look at. And so he talks about poverty and the consequences of other people getting rich and other people getting poor. And he's fascinating, and he wrote another book about environmental economics that was a really big deal. How many of you appreciate that I'm doing this? How many of you would rather I just start class? So, in the interest of political balance, I included Mark Hertsgaard, who's kind of the boogeyman of a lot of liberal environmentalists. Mark Hertsgaard is sort of like a laissez-faire sort of political scientist. He believes that government shouldn't get involved and that environmental problems kind of work out through innovation and free markets. And so he goes around the world and finds like environmental solutions and says, don't worry about it. Climate change is going to work out. Endangered species are going to work out. Like population growth will just work out. I don't know, me and a lot of my liberal friends are like, no, dude, we should really worry and change things. And he's like, nah. And I don't know, he's kind of an interesting dude. He makes some good arguments. He's had a couple of really publicized debates about climate change that you can find on the internet. And I don't know, it's kind of an interesting book, especially if you kind of want to see like what conservative environmentalism looks like. I don't know if that's a fair term. I'm just shooting from the hip here. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Barbara Kingsolver is, forgive me for saying this, world famous for chick lit. Like, I've read all of her books. I love them. But anyway, they're kind of like if Hemingway was like the most macho writer, she's probably the most like chick writer. And neither of those are supposed to be pejorative. I like both of those authors. But she wrote, I think, the first Oprah book, The Poisonwood Bible, which some of you may have heard of. And all of her books are awesome, and I've read them all. Animal Vegetable Miracle is about her family's attempt to have a local diet, which is relevant to this unit. It's nonfiction for 1 whole year. Prodigal Summer is like Desert Solitaire for a female protagonist. All of her books have female protagonists. Prodigal Summer is about a woman park ranger who's in the Appalachian Mountains because she grew up in Appalachia. And her books are really beautiful and emotional and like really nice. Like she's a really excellent writer. Mark Kurlansky is a weirdo. This guy writes books about how surprising resources have shaped world history. So the two that I think are interesting here are cod, about a fish, and salt, about, like regular old table salt. And he basically looks through all history and says like how salt was the first currency and how salt caused the division of these two regions that ended up fighting forever. And like, it's kind of amazing. It's kind of world history and kind of resource conversations. This collection of John Muir stories, I gotta warn you, everybody loves John Muir, but he's not that easy to read. It's kind of like Shakespeare. Like, wow, that's really important, but that doesn't mean I want to read it every day. So if you were gonna read one John Muir collection, this is probably the most readable. It's like the only one that I read the whole thing and thought like, wow, there was really no bad essays in there. Like, John Muir wrote a lot of little things, and this is a collection that's pretty cool. It's all about his experiences in the wilderness. It's all kind of exciting and kind of beautiful. Classic naturalism. Warning, 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 warning. You're all very nice, intelligent people, but Robert Pirsig's book is probably too hard for you. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I've read it 5 times and finished it twice, and I'm still not entirely sure what the book is about. People teach like upper division philosophy classes about this one book. It's considered to be like one of the 5 classics of philosophy, like up there with Plato and stuff. And it's about how we decide on how we apply our values or something like that. And it's like a story about a motorcycle trip that's kind of about values, that's kind of about how you act based on your values, that's kind of about how you decide on how you act based on your values. It's like a frame of a frame of a frame of a frame of the narrative story. But for people that are extremely cerebral, like if you think that all your entire life has been below your IQ, you could give this a shot. It's a real wrestle, but it's really striking. Maybe later, I gotta focus now. I mean, it's a fascinating book, but I still don't really know how many stars to give it because I'm still not really sure that I understand it. All of my smartest students over the years have read it, and they always leave little notes inside the front cover. So if you look like on page 1, it'll be like, this book changed my life, like 2004, and like, I can't believe I finished this, but now I really understand the whole world. And then it was like 2008, there are a lot of these like big thinkers have tried reading it, and a few have finished it. It's pretty Michael Pollan's book is really, really famous. It might be the most famous book on this whole list. Omnivore's Dilemma is about how our industrialized food system makes it really hard for you not to hurt the environment when you eat. So he's like, how do I have a normal diet and not ruin the planet? And it's pretty thoughtful, and it's a great thing to read after this unit. Hint, your mom and dad probably have it already. Because like it was the most popular pop lit book of the last decade or something like that. So it's all over the place. Like everybody has it on their shelf. I probably have like 5 copies. Cadillac Desert is for anybody who's a big fan of the Eastern Sierras. If you're like really big on like Mammoth Lakes and Bishop, it's all about how the growth of Los Angeles affected the Eastern Sierras of California. And it's written by a guy who just recently died of cancer, which is a real loss because he was a super nice dude from Mammoth Lakes, California. I met him there. I think he taught at the City College or whatever. And he wrote the textbook on California water politics. Like now if you take classes on California water, you just read his book, not a hardcover. And it's like the most well-researched understanding of policy and economics and resources that anybody's ever written about your state. That said, it's pretty dry. If you're not really into water politics, this is kind of like, it's really about policy. Like if you're really into policy, then it's fascinating. Richard Rhodes' book about the prion controversy was this like panic about toxins in our food supply, and kind of about how the public makes decisions, and kind of about how the media affects our thinking, and kind of how the public is stupid about math. And it's a pretty interesting American history story about science and the public. Arundhati Roy is like a little short brown foreign woman who is like the most inspiring human on this entire list. She grew up in remote poverty in India, got like a super top-notch world-class education, and started writing books that advocate for her home community, where she returned and runs projects that are all about the poor, about colonialism, and about women's rights. She's like the most inspiring human. She talks about all these big global issues and always ends up smiling and sounding hopeful. She's like the brown Mother Teresa. And one of her books is non-fiction about like modern society affecting the poor. And then one of her books is fiction, but based in a fictionalized version of her home community, which I think is a really interesting way to understand the lives of poor people. Like a lot of us have no idea what it's like to be poor by global standards. So I don't know, I thought her book's beautiful. She's the most wonderful human. I've seen her speak twice, and both times I got goosebumps and cried and laughed and felt really sad and really happy at the same time, and this is like really overwhelming. She's rad. I believe she won a Man Booker Prize. She may have also won a Nobel Prize. She's a really big deal. Have you all heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah.
Who talks about really interesting science stuff and how it's important to everyday society? So that guy got his first internship from Carl Sagan, this next guy. Carl Sagan discovered Neil deGrasse Tyson. P.S. He also discovered Jodie Foster, the actor, who's also like a PhD from Yale because she's like a super nerd. Did anybody know that? She's a PhD from Yale. She was a Rhodes Scholar, by the way. Carl Sagan talked about the value of science, and in today's political climate, this is probably one of the most important books to read. Billions and Billions is kind of about like the future of science and the scope of the universe and the scope of science. Billions and Billions is the framework for Neil deGrasse Tyson's career, by the way. But The Demon Haunted World is all about the value of science in public life. like, again, how the public doesn't understand math and how we make really stupid decisions because we don't act rationally. And if you're a nerd or a scientist, you will love this book. It's like a collection of little essays. They're all like 10 to 20 pages. And it is so inspiring. That book probably convinced me to be a professional scientist more than anything else, which I am not, by the way. Kim Todd's book is all about ecology, invasives and endangered species in the United States, how Americans changing thing has changed our continent. And Alan Weisman's book is maybe the best one on this whole list for this class. Alan Weisman says, imagine if all the humans disappeared from Earth today. It's not apocalyptic, it doesn't focus on that. He just says, what would happen the day after the humans? The week after, the month after? What happens 10 years after humans, 100 years, 10,000 years after humans? And you know, he talks about every problem in my class within that timeline, which is actually a really fascinating way to organize the content of this class. Because every time I tell you about problems, you're like, I don't know, is that the biggest problem? And I'm like, I don't know, what do you care about more, turtles or owls? And the interesting thing about Alan Weisman is he's like, well, this problem will heal in 10 years. This problem will last 10,000 years. And so that's an interesting way for you to put it into context as you take the rest of this class. Like, where does radioactivity fit? Where does climate fit? Where does biodiversity fit in this timeline? I really loved that book. It's a perfect parallel to my class. If you want to know my all-time favorites from the list, they're the ones with 5 stars. If you want to know the ones that were super famous and super important and really shaped who I am, that's 4 stars. 3 stars were good. They were just like, I'm glad I read them. I would recommend them to a friend. 2 stars or less, they have their place for the right person. This is the part where you can ask me questions. What do you want to know? Yeah?
Can we do more than one?
You can, and then decide which one you take the quiz on. So I can't stop you from reading 10, but you only get 1 quiz. So if you read 2 and you're like, oh, I don't really remember that in the first book, but I do in the second one, you can just change the title on your quiz and answer whichever one you want. But you only get 1 set of 5 points. What else? Yeah?
Can we take it before whatever?
No. You gotta take it the day you get back at lunch. What else? Yeah?
Can we take the books now?
Yeah? I have a few to check out. You can see me after class. What else? Yeah?
What are the questions on the quizzes like?
They're general about all the books, but I have keys that are specific to each of the books. So the main environmental implications of this book, which unit in our class has covered the stuff so far in this book, or how does it end, or like what's the, yeah. What else? What else? Last call. Last call. Put that away. Take out the 2-page soil lab. Separate the 2 pages of the soil lab loudly. That was in the back yesterday. Roxy sucks. Can I guess that Aubrey also sucks? You got that one. Nice. Now, I stapled them so everybody would get the right stuff because they're both labs. I do the same changes every year, so it's a packet, but these are 2 separate assignments. Please look up here. One of them is called salinization. One of them is called Soil Lab. The Soil Lab has two parts. From now on, all of our labs, we've got like 5 or 6 others this year, all the labs have a pre-lab and a post-lab. I'll explain what this means, then I'll show you what it is, then we'll talk about the labs, okay? The idea with the pre-labs is my labs take a whole period. So we don't have time for you to come in, me to explain, me to answer questions, and then do the lab. When you show up to do a lab, all I do is, there's the stuff, here's the other stuff, look out for these, they're broken, go. And within like 3 minutes, you're all picking up your materials, and then you do the lab, and then I go, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, and you go outside and you rinse all your glassware, and the bell rings and you leave. So watch, the lab takes the whole period, which means you have to show up with your own notes for doing the lab. I give you a paper about what is going to happen, and you make your own notes. You can't use these on lab day. If they're out, I recycle them. You can only use your own handwritten notes. That way you can convince me that you know what's going to happen because you wrote down your own list of materials and you wrote down your own procedure for lab day. Any questions about that strategy or that philosophy? That's handwritten and unique to every person. You would have Jose's pre-lab, and it would be like these materials, these procedures. I stamp that. It's a classwork point while you're working on your lab. For the rest of this quarter, these are your groups. Get ready. You'll have to remind them. There's a lot of kids absent. Does it smell like propane? Okay, watch me. Watch me. You 3 are a group. 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 You 3 and you 3. Those of you with absent students, you probably want them to know what's going on so that they don't ruin your lab. So you've got a week to get in touch with them. Okay? No. No, just tell them, see the syllabus. It's not how it works. And it's all explained in the syllabus that they signed that says they know how it works. So probably Jack should tell them also. Can you send a text message to Jack that says green cookies don't know how to get credit? So first let's talk about salinization. Anybody know what happens when salt water evaporates? What's left behind?
Salt crystals.
Salt crystals, that's right. So, you know, there's always a little bit of salt in any water. And so every time you water a farm in a place that has poor drainage, the water will evaporate, but all the salt is left behind. Just little bits, but it accumulates over time and the dirt becomes salty. There's this little country called Israel, which has a whole bunch of humans in a really small area. Israel is tiny. And those Israelis have really complicated relationships with their neighbors, so they have to grow almost all their own food in a really small chunk of dirt in the middle of the desert. So they have this problem where they keep irrigating the desert and the water evaporates because it's the desert, and it doesn't have any drainage because it's the desert. So all the salt accumulates in the dirt. And so in many parts of Israel, the farm won't work anymore. The dirt is too salty. It's called salinization or salination. You're going to design an experiment to figure out how much salt is too much salt. You see where it says materials? That's the stuff that you'll get. See where it says materials? You may want to draw this. You build paper towel brings a layer of seeds with more paper towels on top. Then you get that all wet with salt water, and then we cover it up and seal it. And then we're going to see whether the seeds will sprout in a variety of different saltwater solutions. Everybody good? You and your teammates have 1 week to decide which salinities you want to test. That's up to you. I can tell you already that you have to have 0 because that's a control, and that you shouldn't go over 3.5 because I already know that seeds don't sprout in the ocean, and the ocean is 3.6. The pre-lab that you bring, this is handwritten, is this: material and procedure. And please look up. You'll probably want to read all this info. It's a good way to design these parts. So look, pre-lab, look up, is material and procedure, but you want to read all that. I'll stamp this, write this date down on Wednesday the 31st. Then I'll give you the materials and you'll build your lab. You're going to check for sprouting. Please look up this day. And you'll turn in the post-lab data analysis on this day. I guess your period, Wednesday the 14th. Pre-lab is Wednesday the 31st. Post-lab is Wednesday the 14th. Any questions about salinization? All labs have a pre-lab where you handwrite your material and procedures and get your notes ready for the day. Then all labs have a post-lab due after the fact, where you process your data and answer a few little questions on paper. Oh, by the way, this is not like hypothesis, observation, conclusion. Like, this is not those like 8-step scientific process lab write-ups like you did in the 7th grade. This is just note paper and sciencey stuff.
Did you say that the pre-lab was just the procedure and the materials?
That's what I said.
Wouldn't that be the same for everyone?
Well, if you have a different set of concentrations than another student, that's different.
Yeah.
But usually for this assignment, the group will usually agree on those, and so it's pretty similar. What else? These are just the notes that you need to run your lab on lab day. That's always the case. Now, look.
How many variations of salt water?
It's in your instructions. Now put away salinization and look at the soil lab. Read the soil lab intro and put it on your head when you're done with that. Soil lab. What do you think? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Obviously too lazy to lift the paper the whole way. She goes, I can't get my elbow off the table because I'm just too chillaxed. Alright. there's a really important thing that you need to notice. Soil lab is different from salinization lab. One says just soil, one says soil salinization. They're different. Now, for the soil lab, you're all going to bring dirt. We're going to take that dirt and we're going to test that dirt for its physical structure and its chemical structure and its water retention. That's why 3 students work together. And please look up. There's a part 1 and a part 2. They each have material and procedure. See, look up. Part 1, material procedure. Part 2, materials procedure. And this is a lot of writing. I want to warn you that to make good notes on these, you should take some time. It's 2 weeks until the assignment is due. I'm giving you plenty of opportunity because it's a big assignment. Don't say I didn't warn you. You'll need to cut out this part. You can just cut and paste, like literally scissors and glue. And check this out. You gotta bring dirt. Like paper bag or plastic bag or Tupperware or whatever you want, but you gotta bring dirt. Here's some notes about that dirt. You'll maybe want to write this down. Near your home, so you can describe the setting. About 2 cup volume, like a big grapefruit. Maybe roughly the size of a baby's head.
Why?
What is that? That's cute.
Baby's head? So drop the baby head.
Is it a candle?
It's a candle, yeah. My homie did the weirdest art exhibit ever. With burning baby heads.
Does it smell good?
Not particularly. His university was near a factory and he would dumpster dive and take like tremendous milk crates worth of scrap candle material, and then he got like really good at making candle stuff, and he had this fine art exhibit, and he like got all these doll parts and he built molds and he poured candles, and they were all weird, and some of them would cry because he had little holes where like the melted wax would come out, and some of them would bleed and he had layers of red underneath the other stuff. Yes, many different weird doll head things. My bumper ball protector is the head of a doll that I found on the street. And I have one on my dashboard. It's another doll I found on the street. Kind of perverse. Or very. You're going to need about 2 cups of salt from near your house. This cannot be from a bag. Like, just because you can't tell the difference doesn't mean I can't tell the difference. From across the room, I could be like, oh, hey, Bella, I can see that you got that bag of dirt from a bag. Because it's obvious to people who know dirt. So don't get dirt from a bag. I'm telling you, I won't give you credit. We don't accept bag dirt.
What if you like go in the garden?
Nope, it has to be real dirt, like native dirt, like dirt from the ground. So like if people have just dumped in a bunch of bag dirt in your garden, then you have a bag dirt garden, and I want natural dirt. Scrape aside all the mulch and the leaves. It can be dry, hard, I don't really care, but it needs to be about 2 cups of native, real, unbagged dirt, no leaves, no mulch, from a place near your house so that you can describe it. If it's your yard, fine. If it's like the corner where there's like a fire hydrant and the dogs always pee there, I don't care. We just need the dirt. 2 cups. Questions about that? Okay, please look up. Material procedure 1, material procedure 2, the soil triangle, and 2 cups of dirt. This is a double homework assignment because it's so much stuff. I give you 1 point for the dirt and 1 point for the pre-lab. Write this down, due Wednesday to 7, post-lab, due Wednesday to 14. It's on the board. Try not to be absent that day. Your lab team will hate you if you're absent that day.
Wait, what day was it?
Anybody know if all these theater dorks are going to be absent on all the Wednesdays?
No.
This was just a special thing today?
Yeah, just you said.
Cool. Anybody else? You're a theater dork? Do you know when the current production opens? My girl wants to go.
Next week.
Thanks. Okay, that's it for the labs. Ask me all your questions. There's 2 separate labs, 2 separate post labs, 2 separate pre-labs, with a bunch of points. Don't blow it. Tori McMullen?
Wait, so we're doing both parts 1 and 2 on the same day for the soil?
Correct. What else? I'm listening, but you're not asking. And coughing? You're trying to get that fine. Oh, you're way too slow, bro. Okay. Take out your 4.1. Let's do some vocab, and I really want to get a couple study goals, and then the bell's gonna ring. Hey, dude. What? Oh, heaven. Smell that dampness.
Oh, yeah, I know, I could say it.
Oh, God. Are you eating it? I love that stuff. I can't eat right now. I have to do right now. Save it for me. Yeah, you can have. Check my red tote. There's probably one in there somewhere. Don't judge me. There's a lot of trash in there.
What?
Red tote. You just passed it. Red tote. All right. First, I need to warn you. I have to warn you. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. There's a lot of detail from now on. The intro part of Apes is over. Like, now that we're getting to the stuff, you pretty much got to take notes the whole time. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be helpful. That most of this should be new to you now. Vocab questions. Students ask me almost every single word. Ready, set, go.
Limiting factor.
Limiting factor is something which limits growth, either for an individual or a population. So you know how, like, if you don't have any milk in your youth, you have like a height limit, or like if you add more iron to the ocean, it makes more algae because iron is limiting factor, something which limits growth. Yeah.
I don't really know how to like synergistic effect.
I got you, fam. Synergistic effect is when 2 separate factors give you a surprise outcome. I'll explain. There's a few famous examples. Do you all know that there's medicines you can't take if you're on blood thinners? So something like muscle relaxants plus heart thinners will stop your heart or something like that? Now, blood thinners are a safe medication. Pain medication is safe when used correctly. But if you mix those, you get this weird magic. Like, you can have some Mentos and you can have some soda, but if you put them both in your mouth, your head explodes. It's when you have a surprise outcome from combining things. This is important because we know that a lot of individual ingredients are safe, but we don't know how they act when they're all combined in your body. A lot of you high school kids, you're on weird medicines, you've got weird diets, you've got weird recreational drugs, and our body has all these weird miscellaneous, and our environment has all these weird miscellaneous toxins. And one-on-one, they may be okay and tolerable, but that combination of things might have some unusual outcomes. I have one last example, and then I'll get your question. I'll make up numbers for this, but the concept is correct, okay? These are made up numbers. 1 in 100 smokers dies of cancer. 1 in 100 people exposed to asbestos dies of cancer. Don't quote me, those are made up numbers. But what happens when a smoker is exposed to asbestos? You would expect, well, 1 in 100 plus 1 in 100 is 2 in 100 of those will die, right? But surprisingly, when smokers are exposed to asbestos, like 99% of them die of cancer. And like I said, don't quote me on the numbers, but this is a synergistic effect, where smoking makes asbestos worse and asbestos makes smoking worse, so the combination of those things is worse than the sum of the parts. Synergistic effect. Surprising outcome when you combine factors.
I was gonna say, are those chemical reactions?
They can be a chemical reaction, or it can be a physical phenomenon, like asbestos cuts your lung tissue, so the smoke gets into your blood more, and smoke paralyzes the filter, so more asbestos reaches your lungs. So those are both physical things that then have chemical stuff later. Other vocabs.
Wait, which ones have you said already?
What?
Which ones have you said already?
Yeah. Oh, Terminator gene is good. Imagine that I spent $1 gazillion developing a really cool, neat, fancy, glow-in-the-dark dog. And I get Kyler to pay me like $1,000 for this fancy glow-in-the-dark dog. But she can just talk to Adam, who bought another one of these glow-in-the-dark, and they can just make their own, and I'm out of money now. You understand that if you spend a lot of money in an investment, you don't want people to make your product. That's why, like, when you sell a DVD, you can't copy it very easily. So what's a seed company going to do? If they make you like some cool genetically modified corn, they don't want you to save your own seeds and grow it yourself. So they make a Terminator gene in genetically modified crops, so that the next generation seed is sterile. It's like an auto self-destruct for the DNA. It won't copy. You can't make viable seed. So they have to come back to the company and keep buying their seeds from Monsanto or Bayer or whoever. Yeah.
How do the companies do that?
So it's a gene that interrupts the transcription of DNA in the making of the gani. So they make seeds, like you can eat the corn of that plant, but if you take the corn of that plant and you try to plant it, it just won't sprout. It doesn't have the key parts to make the next generation. Next. Yeah.
BT.
Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterium in the soil. Watch me. I drew this already because other kids asked me. Check this out. That bacterium is toxic. Only to insects. So you can eat it and you'll be fine. But if there's like bugs in the dirt, they cannot eat that bacteria. And some science nerd was like, yes, toxic to bugs but not mammals, huh? You might understand where this is going. Please look up. They cut out the DNA that makes the toxin, put it into the DNA of strawberry, so that when the strawberry grows into a plant, every cell of the strawberry is toxic to bugs. It's built-in pesticide. So now you can grow BT corn, and like if a bug tries to eat your corn, the bug dies. So you need to use pesticides. They were like, look, you hippies, no more pesticide. And all the hippies were like, yeah, but what about the good bugs? And like, all the butterflies died. And you're like, oh, butterflies. It's like migratory monarch butterflies, like, don't pass Kansas. It's like corn state, and like all the monarchs are like, because all it's time for the pollen and they die. Yeah.
The last one is mariculture.
Saltwater fish farming. Like aquaculture is fish farming, and el mar is the ocean. So mariculture is oceanic aquaculture. Let's go, let's go, let's go, vocabs.
Marasmus.
There's a lot of different ways to starve, but marasmus is when you don't get enough protein or calories, people call it wasting disease or straight starving. Like marasmus is when you don't even get enough calories. Whereas kwashiorkor is when you don't get enough protein, but you have a lot of calories. People call that refugee disease or refugee camp disease. You ever seen like footage on television or the internet of like those little tiny skinny children with the big swollen guts?
Mm-hmm.
They pack in like a whole bunch of rice or barley, or they get calories. They don't get any protein. So they get like developmental disorders and like nervous disorders. And they're not starving, but they're not getting the right ingredients. So there's malnutrition and undernourishment. Yeah.
Pasture.
Grassland for grazing. Actually, it doesn't have to be grassland. Pasture is grazing land. A place where livestock feeds. Yeah.
You said that on the new guy that you wanted to go over demand-based and research-based.
That's a study goal. Yeah.
Monoculture?
When you grow one thing in the same place. So like Idaho is potato monoculture. What else? Nothing? We're done? Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't do tillage go to those POPs.
Got you. It's tillage, which is plowing. You know, like breaking up the dirt in little pieces. Y'all know why farmers break up the dirt?
Nutrients.
Air, nutrients for the decomposers, soak up more water, make it easier to plant. Got it? Air, nutrients, soak more water, easier to work. Anybody know the problem with breaking up the dirt into really fine little pieces? Erosion. So, tillage is plowing, and low-till agriculture is to prevent erosion. You break it up less. Kind of harder to do those benefits, but at least it doesn't go away. And do I have to define what no-till agriculture means? Because you understand, right? Just no tillage. Prevent erosion. POPs is a long explanation. POPs is a long explanation. Remember how we talked about pesticide reserves where you spray the pesticide and then the bugs all come back? You can understand that when chemists could figure it out, the goal of pesticide makers for a long time was to make pesticides that would never go away, so the bugs can never come back. Do you understand why they want long-term pesticide? So the bugs won't come back? Are we clear with that idea? Mm-hmm. In our planet, some chemistry is not stable. Like, have you noticed that you have to keep adding like chlorine to the jacuzzi? Like, I just put this in last week, but then you got to put in more. Like, where does that go? Like, it reacts and it leaves the water and it goes away as chlorine oxide. How many of you are aware of this concept? They have to keep adding the chlorine because the chemical that kills the funk in the water goes away, so you have to always add more. That's an unstable chemical. Or like sugar is unstable because as soon as any organism eats it, it's going to break it down. So sugar disappears because it'll be used up biologically. Are we cool with that? Unstable? Now your definition. Persistent organic pollutant. Persistent organic pollutant. And that's just the word, but you still don't understand why that's important. I'm halfway through my explanation. Persistent means it's a stable compound, like it won't break down. Persistent means it's like stable. Organic is not like the strawberries at farmers market, it just means carbon-based, because it's very easy in a chemistry lab to work with carbon bonds. Like scientists, those are like Legos. Like, oh, just stick on more stuff, easy. Like in chemistry terms, it's like the easy Legos. Carbon bonds are just like stick it up, stick it up, stick it up, and just build whatever you want. And pollutants, you know, like stuff that kills living things. And here's where we get to the important part. There was a generation of pesticides that were stable carbon-based toxins. They were really deadly. You would spray DDT, and like the bugs would never come back until the rain washed away the DDT. It's persistent, so that compound is always DDT. Like all the DDT ever made is still on Earth. Every last molecule is still out there somewhere. And our cells love it because it's carbon-based. We evolved in a world where carbon was really rare, so your cells are stupid. They're like, ooh, carbon, and they just soak up these toxins. I know you're all zoning out because this is a long explanation, but I'll just give you a hint. This will make you a much more knowledgeable adult. For the rest of your life, you're going to use this explanation and it will help you. This is like critical life skills. Like I've explained this to my homies 100 times in my life. Get ready. By making stable carbon-based pesticides, we shot a bunch of bullets that keep flying at full speed. We made poisons that are still poisonous and are still out there, and they just soak up into life because it's carbon-based and our cells are stupid. Here's a horrifying thought. Imagine if I want to exterminate a squirrel with a bullet, and I shoot that squirrel, and that bullet just keeps on flying full speed forever. Sooner or later, that's gonna hit Adam, and sooner or later, if it's flying forever, it's gonna hit Daniela, and then sooner or later, it's gonna fly around, it's gonna hit me. These are our persistent organic pollutants. They're stable carbon compounds that are still toxic and they're still out there. And life keeps soaking them up and dying and soaking them up. So they're a type of pesticides that were very stable and carbon-based, which means they're going to be dangerous in our ecosystem forever. All the DDT that has ever been made by humanity is still out there. Almost all of it's in the ocean now. Understand? Anybody want to ask me anything? This is a key concept. It's a tricky explanation. It's okay if you ask. Yeah?
So, in small-scale agriculture, they're trying to stay away from those and use pesticides that break down, correct?
Yeah, so, like, if you're going to use pesticides, you probably want to use ones that degrade so that they're not toxic forever. Bullets that slow down, so to speak. What else? Yeah?
So since most of those don't occur naturally in nature, so nature doesn't have a way to degrade them, do we have methods of
In a lab, yes. Like if we had like a sponge to soak up all the DDT and go back to the glassware, sure. But considering that all that stuff is in like a little bit of that plant, a little bit of that plant, like we don't have like a cone to pick it out like lice. Good visual. What else? Other vocabs? I'll bet you've got other vocabs that you're not asking, so I'm not telling.
Can you do this certification?
Yeah, please look up. This is another key distinction. You will make this mistake someday. Look, erosion is when you lose soil. But desertification is when your soil gets crappy. It loses quality or fertility. It turns from good dirt into crappy desert dirt. Desertification. It goes from being good to crappy dirt. Yeah?
How does that happen?
Kind of a long explanation. You prevent the addition of organic material, you stop the decomposition, the natural inputs that make soil good. So you change it from like a soil food web, like a forest floor, into like an empty sand pit where nothing is adding nutrients. So you suck out all the good stuff and you don't add any more. It's like a depleted checking account. Yeah?
Does salinization fall into that, or is that separate?
I guess it would. It's not classic desertification. It's a specific type where you have a problem, you've built up a problematic ingredient. But that would lower its quality and lower its fertility, so I guess so. Yeah. Yes?
Did you already go over demand-based agriculture and research?
Study goal later. Last call for vocab. This is the last call for vocab. Okay, super tight. Ooh, we've got a few minutes. I can do this. Number 1, you just write down a number from your book. I'm not going to do it. Number 2, you just copy 6 bullets from the book. I'm not going to do it. But that one gets a star later, so you should know it. But number 3 is a fascinating, horrible thought. I have a really depressing bit of bad news for you. I need you to remember this for the rest of your lives. And if you think it's wrong, good. Correct me. And please look at the warm-up. Today we have 7.3 billion humans on Earth, or so. 7.8, 7.6, 7.5, anybody know? Abby, can you find out how many humans we have on Earth? However many we have, is there enough food for them? Like, just in case you didn't know, about 1 in 5 of those is either starving or at least malnourished. Is there enough food for all the humans on Earth? Yeah.
I think there is.
You do?
Because I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that there is, but I don't know why. Not the one I still started.
Yeah? Go, Bella.
Yeah, I think that I kind of also agree. That I think there is just developed countries use way more than their fair share and produce a lot of waste.
Huh. Quinn?
I just think that we can't like distribute it to everyone that needs it because they're in just like foreign countries and stuff.
Anybody else? So here's a crazy thought. Our planet grows enough food to feed roughly twice the world population today, between 15 and 18 billion humans. Now, we got to think about that for just a second here. First of all, if you don't like my numbers, find me better numbers. I appreciate it. I pay you extra credit. You should never quote my numbers. But conceptually, I know I'm right, at least about the idea. Like we in the United States, 1/3 of everything we grow goes directly to trash. Like it either rots in the field, or it rots in storage, or it rots in processing, or it rots in distribution, or it rots on the shelf, or it rots at your house, or you throw it away after you cook it and didn't eat it. 1/3 of everything grown in our nation. And another one of those thirds we feed to animals, some of which we're going to eat. But just to put things in perspective, the American dog food supply could end world hunger. At least cure the starving, maybe not the malnourished. I mean, here's a wacky thought. Like, we in the United States, we have the opposite problem. Most of us have too much food. Like, we are dying from too much. We have fat dogs. So this is the thing I need you to remember forever and ever. Every one of those starving children is just a failure of the imagination. It's not because we don't have enough food. We just can't figure out, like, how, I don't know, Syria getting the food. God, yes, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, my dog is fat, but I don't know how to help you. I threw away baked potatoes and asparagus yesterday. I don't know. I mean, Somalia's so far. I don't even know where that is. Like, Africa? I mean, here's the crazy thing. You got starving people in our own backyard. You don't have to go all the way to Africa. There's like starving people in Santa Barbara. And so, the thing I need you to know for number 3 is that starvation is about access to food. It's not about the availability of food, it's about the distribution. Now, why doesn't it get there?
How are there starving people in Santa Barbara? It's like, that's impossible.
Yeah, right? But it's possible, and it's real.
I mean, like, you can just get food stamps.
Well, you don't just get food stamps. There's a whole complicated government network trying to limit your access to food stamps. You can't. Are you on food stamps? Do you want to clear me up on how you do this? No, you're not. And so I don't think that you're an expert, but it's not as easy as you would think. I mean, there's free food. There's a lot of places where you can just go and get free food. But that doesn't mean that's accessible to everybody. You know, we have a lot of people who are like really, really sick, and there's just like nobody to take care of them, and so they just run around haunted by demons that aren't there, or voices in their head, or by their addictions, or by their traumas, that just can't even figure out how to get that food in their mouth.
Then wouldn't it not be starvation?
Well, they got other problems that lead to their starvation, if that's your point, but literally people starve. That's how it happens, to answer your question. It's like I don't want anybody to feel bad. You got a fat dog like Mazel Tov. I'm happy for you and your dog. But it is important to remember that it's just not about the amount of food. It's because we're just like, well, but I don't know. Like, these are solvable problems, and we just don't, like, do that solution. And some of those are very difficult to solve. Someone said, I don't think they could get the food. Tanner, you better not have your phone out or I'll break it on your face. I can see it from here, bro!
Am I on it?
Were you just on it?
Yeah.
Then can you please put it away? Damn, bro.
Oh shit.
Where were we?
Somebody over there said they don't think.
Yeah, somebody over here was like, well, I don't think we could get it to all those people, and that's probably fair. Like when my asparagus was kind of like stinky and like kind of runny yesterday, and I realized I didn't want to cook it after all. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like overnight that to Somalia? Like that doesn't mean that like all of our food waste is avoidable, but you know, probably some ways that we could improve our systems. There has to be some way that we can tighten up our ship a little bit. Yeah.
There's I recently read something that says that a lot of food and when it's like picked by farmers by the harvest and shipped to like markets, a huge percentage of that is like just thrown on the ground because it's not aesthetically pleasing enough.
Oh yeah. Ugly food accounts for something like 20% of food waste. Yeah.
Like if we harvested.
I know. I've worked on farms. I see that all the time. So that's what we eat on farms. There's all the ugly food. Like, eat your farm for food. We're going to talk more about these breakdowns in food distribution, but our punchline that I need to leave you with today is world hunger is like a logistics problem. It's not a food problem. Every one of those hungry people is someone we could feed. But either they smell too bad and we don't want to touch them, or they're too expensive to make healthy, or they're too far away to send them the food. Horrifying thought, right? Isn't that a horrifying thought? We have fat dogs. can't get over that. I can't get over that. There are dogs with diabetes.
Oh my god.
No. Like 4% of America's insulin is put into dogs. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Google it. 3.8, 3.6. I can't remember. 3.7. 5. Thank you. Yes.